This story is titled, I Was Falsely Accused by My Golden Brother's Girlfriend. My family believed her and disowned me. Now they want to reconcile after the truth came out. Hey guys, I never thought I'd be the one writing this here, but life has a funny way of coming full circle. So buckle up! This one's a mess. Let's get into it. I, 25 male, always knew my younger brother, Ryan, 23 male, was the favorite. It wasn't even subtle. My parents, 55 female and 59 male, worshipped the ground he walked on. He was the golden boy, the one they bragged about at family gatherings, the kid who could crash a car into a tree, and they'd somehow find a way to blame the tree. Meanwhile, I was the problem child. Not because I actually was a problem, but because I wasn't him. I could do everything right, and it still wouldn't matter. If I got straight A's, they'd say Ryan was naturally intelligent and didn't need to try as hard. If I won an award, they'd brush it off like it was just an extracurricular. If I worked my ass off at a summer job, they'd laugh about how Ryan was enjoying his youth instead of wasting time on nonsense. It was like I was background noise in my own family. It wasn't just about how my parents favored him. Ryan was a total jerk with me as well. He was a master manipulator when it came to turning our parents against me. He never had to try hard because, honestly, they already favored him. I remember when I was about 17, I was studying for a big exam. Ryan kept coming into my room, messing with my stuff, poking me in the back of the head, humming loudly, just being an annoying little shit on purpose. I told him to get out, but he ignored me. After about 10 minutes of this, I slammed my textbook shut and yelled at him to leave me alone. Of course, he immediately ran to my parents. Suddenly, I was angry all the time and scaring him. He told them I was stressed and taking it out on him. I tried to explain what actually happened, but my parents weren't interested. They just told me I needed to work on my temper and stop bullying my little brother. He was an expert at planting doubt in my parents' heads. He wouldn't just outright accuse me of things. He'd just imply things, drop little comments that would make them start questioning me. One time, I saved up and bought myself a new laptop. I was proud of it. I worked for months to afford it. Ryan, of course, was jealous. So one day he casually told my parents, I don't know how he could afford that. Are you sure he didn't take money from somewhere? That's all he had to say. Suddenly, my parents were grilling me about my finances, demanding to see proof of where my money came from. They never would have asked Ryan that question. But because it was me, they immediately assumed I was up to something shady. So as I grew up, I tended to avoid their drama. I focused on myself. I got into working out, picked up some skills, saved money where I could. I knew I wouldn't get handouts from my parents, so I made sure I wouldn't need one. While Ryan was the total opposite. He was the kind of guy who thought life was one big vacation. He never held a job for more than a few months. He always had some new hobby or business idea that never went anywhere. He went to college, but not to actually study, more like to hang out, party, and barely scrape by. My parents funded the whole thing. Then came his girlfriend, Zoe, 22 female. Zoe and Ryan started dating when he was in college. She was exactly the type of person he'd go for. Loud, always needing attention, and always on social media, trying to act like an influencer. She had a fake kind of charm, the type that worked on guys like Ryan, but was easy to see through if you actually paid attention. Zoe was the kind of girl who thrived on drama. If there wasn't a problem, she'd create one just for the attention. She had a habit of exaggerating everything that happened to her. If someone at a store gave her a weird look, suddenly it was, that cashier was so rude to me, probably jealous or something. If she got constructive criticism in class, it became, my professor is literally targeting me because I'm too pretty. If a waitress got her order wrong, she'd act like it was a personal attack and would go off on some long-winded rant about how people don't respect her. Everything had to revolve around her. She'd hijack conversations, make everything about herself, and had this ridiculous need to be the center of attention, no matter where she was. You know, a typical pick-me. At first, I didn't care. She was just another girlfriend. Ryan cycled through them every few months, and I figured she'd be gone soon enough. But Zoe stuck around. And after a while, I started noticing little things. She was trying to get a bit too friendly with me. And you know what I mean when I say friendly. She'd go out of her way to compliment me when nobody was around. You're so disciplined. I wish Ryan had your focus. Stuff like that. At first, I ignored it. Then it escalated. She'd ask me about my workouts and then make jokes about how Ryan could learn from me. She'd text me out of nowhere, asking for advice on things that had nothing to do with me. I should have shut it down sooner, but I figured she was just playing some dumb game to make Ryan jealous. It wasn't my problem. But then, one night after a family dinner, she sneaked to my room. That's when I realized it wasn't just harmless flirting. She leaned in way too close, blocking my way out. Her voice was lower than usual, like she was testing the waters. She told me she was bored with Ryan, that I was different, that she wouldn't tell if I didn't, and then she tried to kiss me. I pushed her off immediately. I wasn't even subtle about it. I told her to stay the hell away from me and that if she tried this again, I'd expose her myself. And just like that, her whole act switched. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't apologetic. She just looked at me, calculating. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't just going to let this go. I thought maybe she'd keep her distance after that she'd realize she messed up and just avoid me. But she took things in a completely different direction. The next day, I came home, and the house felt off. My parents were stiff. Ryan looked at me as if I just murdered his dog. And then Zoe, standing behind them, started crying. I didn't want to say anything, but he tried to force himself on me last night. I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard her. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so completely ridiculous that I thought it was a joke. Woof! Ryan lunged at me. My dad had to hold him back. You sick freak! I looked at Zoe, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to cut this crap, but she just stood there, looking hurt like I had actually done something. I tried to explain. I told them she was the one who came on to me. I told them I rejected her, that this was some kind of revenge because she was scared I'd expose her. But none of it mattered. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't try to hear my side. They didn't even hesitate. My dad coldly said, "Get your things and get out." I looked at my mom. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to scream at them for being so stupid to believe such a thing. But I knew how this worked. They had already made their choice. And judging by how I was always given the black sheep treatment, arguing would be pointless. So I packed a bag and left. Getting kicked out was one thing. Realizing how easy it was for them to do it, that was worse. No hesitation, no doubt, no second guessing. They threw me away like I was nothing. Like I wasn't their son. Like I hadn't been part of that family for over 20 years. And the thing that really got me? Not a single phone call, not a single text, not even a half-assed, "Are you okay?" from my mother. I didn't have much. Just a duffel bag of clothes, a few $100 in my bank account, and my car. That was it. I hadn't been planning for this, but luckily I had some money saved from odd jobs I'd done over the years. Not much, but enough to keep me from sleeping on the street, at least for a little while. I spent the first few nights in my car, and believe me, that was pretty far from fun. But I had to live. Later, as the news about the whole thing spread among the family, I got a call from my cousin Lucas, 28 male. He was the only one who never believed Zoe's lie. He always been my buddy since childhood, and he offered me to stay at his place for a while. At this point, he was a real brother to me. I stayed at his place for a few days till I pulled myself together. I couldn't stay with him for too long. I already know he's got his own problems to deal with, and I never wanted to burden him. After that, I found a temp job at a warehouse within a week. It paid like crap, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I also scraped together enough money to rent a tiny room in a shared house. The kind of place where the walls were thin, and you had to pray your roommates weren't drug addicts or lunatics. Then I got another gig working overnight at a gas station. 2 jobs, no sleep, just working, eating whatever was cheap, and crashing for a couple of hours in my car between shifts. It was a grind, but I wasn't about to sit around feeling sorry for myself. Every second I wasted being pissed off was a second I wasn't working toward getting out of this mess. Ryan, meanwhile, was living it up. I tried not to check his social media, but sometimes curiosity got the best of me. Every time I saw his posts, it was the same thing. Parties, vacations, expensive new things. It was like watching a kid burn through his inheritance in real time. My parents were still bankrolling his lifestyle, and he was milking it. I won't lie, it pissed me off. Not just because of the unfairness of it all, but because I knew exactly how this was going to end. Ryan had never worked a real job in his life. He had no skills, no work ethic, no plan. He was burning through money like it would never run out. But one day, it would. And when that day came, I knew exactly who he'd come running to. But that was not my problem. Right now, I had to focus on surviving. The warehouse job turned into something more stable, and I started picking up extra shifts whenever I could. I lived cheap. No wasting money on dumb stuff. Every dollar went toward building a safety net. Once I had a little cushion, I started thinking bigger. I picked up some books on finance and investing. I started learning about business. I taught myself some coding. Any spare moment I had, I was learning something new. I didn't want to just survive, I wanted to be untouchable. I started freelancing on the side. Nothing big, just small gigs I could do online. At first, it was barely worth it. $10, $20 here and there. But I stuck with it. Eventually, those small gigs turned into steady income. I started making as much from freelancing as I did from my warehouse job. A year passed. I moved out of that crappy shared house and into my own place. Nothing fancy, but mine. I quit the warehouse job and went full-time into business. By year 3, I was making more money than I ever thought possible. Look now, about my family, I cut them off completely since that Zoe incident. They didn't even try to reach out anyway, and I couldn't care less. During all that time, I was still in touch with Lucas. We would meet up from time to catch up. One day, when I hadn't met Lucas for a couple of months, he called me to meet him, telling me there's some news I had to hear. I met him at a coffee shop, and without introductions, he was like, "Yo, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you." At first, he told me how Rayon's life was starting to crack. It started with small things. The flashy vacations stopped. The constant flexing on social media slowed down. He was having money problems. Apparently, he had tried to start a business. Some half-baked entrepreneur nonsense that he thought would make him rich overnight. It failed spectacularly. He lost a ton of money, burned through his savings, and still hadn't figured out how to work an actual job. People always say you learn who your real friends are when you hit rock bottom. Ryan learned it the hard way. The same people who had been partying with him, the same ones who cheered him on when he was wasting money, all disappeared the second he wasn't useful anymore. Now comes the real tea. Zoe. For a while, she had been just as flashy as Ryan, if not worse, posting about how they were living the dream, acting like they were the next power couple. But once the money started running out, she ditched him. They even found out that she cheated on him with multiple people, hooking up with one of her friends. Oh, about this. Things will get even more interesting. Honestly, I saw it coming. She was never in it for the long haul. She was there for the lifestyle, the attention, the free vacations, and the Instagram-worthy moments. Once Ryan couldn't provide those things anymore, she cut her losses and bailed. And my parents? They were finally noticing. They had spent years throwing money at him, hoping he'd somehow magically become successful. But now, with nothing to show for it, they were finally questioning things. I wasn't part of their lives anymore, but I knew how they thought. My mom must have been devastated seeing her perfect son start to fail. My dad, the same guy who kicked me out without a second thought, must have been wondering why his golden child still needed handouts. I should have felt bad for them, for Ryan, but I didn't. But here's where it gets interesting. Zoe was known to have a big mouth, the type to talk way too much, especially when she's drunk. Turns out, after she left Ryan, she went out with some of her old party friends and let her mouth run a little too freely. And guess what? She drunkenly admitted everything. She told them she had lied about me, that I never actually done anything to her, that she only accused me because I had rejected her and threatened to expose her. She thought it was hilarious how my parents immediately took her side, how she had played the victim so well that they hadn't even considered questioning her. She was laughing about it, bragging, treating the whole thing like some stupid joke. And her friends? They thought it was funny too. Funny enough to record her saying it. At the time, I had no idea this was happening. I was too busy living my life to care about what any of them was up to. But Lucas told me that one of her friends, someone just as toxic as she was, eventually sent that recording to my parents. I don't know why. Maybe she was pissed at Zoe for something. Maybe she just wanted to stir up drama. Either way, my parents got the recording. I wasn't there to see their reaction, but I can imagine it. The realization, the shame, the undeniable proof that they had ruined their relationship with their own son over a complete lie. So here's the thing. After I got this massive news, and while Ryan was getting a slap on the face with his own issues, guess who tried to reach out to me again? Yes. It started with a bunch of missed calls from my mom and dad. Then mom would message me something like, "We need to talk," followed by a bunch of voicemails telling me they realized they were wrong and how sorry they were. Rayan would also text me asking me if we could talk. Yeah, now they need to talk. I ignored it. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't apologizing because they had some grand revelation about how terribly they had treated me. No, they just need to fix their own guilt. They couldn't stand the idea that they had thrown me out like garbage, only to find out years later that it was all based on a complete lie. They needed to fix it, but only for themselves. I wasn't interested, until my mother left a voicemail that caught my attention. "Ryan is in serious trouble. Please just call me back." I almost laughed when I heard it. Serious trouble? What, was his credit card finally maxed out? Did his latest get-rich-quick scheme collapse in on itself? Was he struggling to afford his overpriced apartment now that Zoe wasn't around to leech off of him? I let the voicemail sit there for a day before I caved and called back. Not because I cared, but because I was curious. She picked up on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." I leaned against my desk, waiting. "What do you want?" She hesitated for a second, like she was still trying to figure out the best way to spin it. "It's Ryan," she said finally. He's in a lot of debt. He made some bad investments, took out loans, and now the banks won't help him. No one will." Now I did laugh. Because really, what did she expect me to say? "Oh no, let me swoop in and save him. Let me throw the money I worked my ass off for at the same people who tossed me aside with no hesitation." Instead, I asked, "And what does that have to do with me? You're doing well now. You have the means to help." And there it was. They had finally hit the bottom of the barrel. Ryan, their golden child, had crashed and burned so badly that the only person left who could bail him out was me. The same son they had humiliated and discarded over a complete lie. And now that their life was falling apart, now that they had no one left to turn to, I was suddenly worth talking to again? How funny. I let the silence drag out before I said, "You're joking, right?" She rushed. "We know we made mistakes. We know things should have gone differently. But family looks out for each other. And Ryan needs help. You wouldn't just let your family drown, would you?" I took a breath. "Let me get this straight. You all believed a liar over me, threw me out without a second thought, ignored me for years, and now that Ryan has finally screwed up his own life beyond repair, you want me to fix it? Sweetheart, it is that simple," I cut her off. But instead of telling her to screw off like I wanted to, I said, "Let me think about it." And I hung up. No, I wasn't actually considering it, but I wanted them to sit with the uncertainty, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd swoop in like the perfect son they had never appreciated. Let them hope. Let them wait. Then, finally, I set up the meeting. I told my mother to have everyone there, her, my father, and Ryan. If they wanted to beg, they'd do it to my face. We met at a restaurant. A nice one I knew they could barely afford anymore. They must have assumed I picked it to be polite. When I walked in, they were already seated. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years. My father, usually smug and confident, looked uncomfortable. And Ryan? He looked wrecked. For the first time in his life, he looked desperate. I sat down and leaned back in my chair. "All right," I said. "Go ahead." They didn't even pretend to ease into it. My mother immediately launched into a long-winded speech about family, forgiveness, second chances. My father, too proud to grovel, just muttered about how mistakes were made. Then Ryan spoke. "I screwed up. I know that. But I just need a little help, man. Just enough to get back on my feet." I let them talk. Let them pour it all out. Then finally I said, "No." I shrugged. "I'm not helping you." My mother sucked in a sharp breath. "Sweetheart, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I repeated. What wasn't reasonable was abandoning me and only coming back now because your golden child finally ran out of luck. "Dude, I'm your brother." "No, you're not," I said simply. "You stopped being my brother the second you threw me under the bus." He wanted to argue, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out my wallet, took out a $100 bill, and set it on the table. "There, buy yourself some dignity." Then I stood up and left. Years of anger, resentment, and frustration. All of it just faded the second I left them sitting there, staring at the $100 bill like it was some kind of insult. Which, to be fair, it was. A few months passed. Life went on. I had spent years working my ass off, making sure I never had to depend on anyone. Now I was in a place where I could actually enjoy what I built. My business grew, my circle stayed solid, and I felt better than I ever had. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. My family on the other side, expectedly, were not doing well. Ryan's life had completely unraveled. The debt caught up to him faster than he could run from it. He had burned through every handout, maxed out every line of credit, and defaulted on loans he had no business taking in the first place. Desperation made him reckless. He got involved in some shady side hustles, trying to make quick cash, but predictably, he wasn't smart enough to cover his tracks. A few bad deals, a couple of unpaid debts to the wrong people, and suddenly he was facing charges. It didn't take long for the whole thing to implode. Fraud, embezzlement, whatever half-baked scheme he thought would save him, ended up being what buried him. His business failures were one thing, but this was a federal-level screw-up. He got arrested, dragged through court, and eventually sentenced. The same guy who once had everything handed to him was now sitting in a prison cell, broke, alone, and with no one left to bail him out. My parents? Oh, they were devastated. Not because their precious Ryan turned out to be a full-blown criminal. Nah, that part didn't seem to bother them much. What really broke their hearts was that their golden child wasn't so golden anymore. Hard to keep up the perfect family act when your pride and joy is wearing an orange jumpsuit, right? They had spent years bending over backward for him, covering for his mistakes, throwing money at his problems like that would magically make him competent. And now, all that blind loyalty, just for him to end up in a prison cell with a bunch of other idiots. Every bridge they burned with me, every time they treated me like an outsider, yeah, they wish they could undo all that now. Too bad. By the time they realized they backed the wrong horse, I was already too far ahead to care.